Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're discussing one of the most stunning resorts in all of North America, Lake Louise. Beyond its incredible views of the Canadian Rockies, Lake Louise is one of the most well-rounded ski resorts out there. In this video, we'll be discussing only what you need to know to make the most out of your Lake Louise visit. With it being one of the largest resorts in the Canadian Rockies, Lake Louise has a lot to talk about, so this episode will be divided into two parts. For this video, we'll go over some background information and cover the Frontside and Ptarmigan areas. We'll work through the rest of the mountain in the next part. So with that, let's begin an Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Lake Louise. Lake Louise is located in Banff National Park in Alberta, Canada, but isn't that bad to get to. If you're flying in from out of town, Calgary is definitely the recommended city to fly into. From there, take Highway 1, the Trans-Canada, all the way to the resort. The drive is very scenic, and less challenging than you might expect. On the way to Lake Louise, you'll pass the town of Banff, which is definitely the place I'd recommend staying for the most bang for your buck. Although the drive from Banff to Lake Louise is around 45 minutes, the public shuttle system in Banff is fantastic and provides easy and direct access to Lake Louise. If you want a fancier option, then the Fairmont Chateau, located next to the resort's namesake Lake Louise, is a great option. Parking at Lake Louise is very straightforward, with it essentially having one massive lot out front. Lake Louise, along with Sunshine Village and Mount Norquay, are the three primary mountains in Banff National Park and are known as Ski Big 3. All of these mountains are accessible through one lift ticket and have 5 to 7 days of access on the Icon Pass, based on which plan you purchase. Norquay is more of a low-key downhill with some cool advanced options off its North American chair. Sunshine Village has a bit of everything and is known for its iconic Delirium dive. We'll talk about Sunshine Village in its own Insider's Guide, coming later this year. Lake Louise is definitely the most expert-oriented of the three, but still offers decent options for beginners and intermediates. Norquay, Sunshine Village, and the town of Banff are pretty close to each other, while Lake Louise is a bit separated. In general, the Ski Big 3 resorts receive lighter and drier snow than their British Columbia neighbors come Whistler Blackcomb. However, they tend to receive less in terms of overall quantity. As such, early seasons at Lake Louise can be extremely rocky, especially if you're tackling the advanced and expert lines. If it's been a low snow year, rock skis are essential. Lake Louise is divided into 3 primary zones: its frontside, its backside, and the Larch Pod. As previously mentioned, Lake Louise is definitely best suited for advanced and expert skiers, although beginners and intermediates can still find some decent options. The mountain is really known for the bowls and chutes on its legendary backside, but has flavors of all terrain types even in that area. Most of Louise's terrain is pretty reliably open, with the exception being its expert terrain, which can remain closed for a significant part of the early season due to insufficient snow coverage. As you'll see, much of Lake Louise's single black terrain is improperly rated, with some of those trails being comparable to Louise's double blacks. It's also worth knowing that Louise Ski Patrol assesses its runs on a daily basis, and will bump up a run's rating if they deem a run harder than usual. For example, when I was visiting, Whitehorn 1 was rated double black instead of single due to the low coverage and rocky conditions. Due to its remote location, crowding at Lake Louise isn't usually a major issue, so I really won't have much to say about that in this episode. Another great thing about Lake Louise is that it sits at a much lower elevation than most of the destination resorts in the US. Those prone to altitude sickness shouldn't have many issues skiing here. Snowboarders, however, should be a bit wary about visiting Lake Louise, as there are several prolonged required catwalks in the backside area. Despite its size, navigating around Lake Louise in general is pretty straightforward. The trail map isn't fully to scale, but is overall pretty easy to use. Now, with that background information out of the way, let's dive into the mountain itself. Out of the main base, you'll find a few options to get onto the mountain. There are a few magic carpets that serve as this trail, Sunnyside, and if you're a first-timer, head straight there. There is a planned Sunnyside lift that will be built in a future season, which will make the beginner skiing experience at Louise a lot better than it currently is. It's unclear to me whether this lift will replace these carpets, so we'll have to wait and see. A bit of a trek from the rest of the lifts is the Juniper Express lift. This lift services some pretty average lower mountain intermediate trails. I'd only recommend skiing this pod if the upper mountain is closed. Otherwise, there's definitely more enjoyable intermediate terrain to be found elsewhere at the resort. While Juniper Express as a standalone project isn't that great, the upper Juniper lift being built throughout the summer of 2024 is finally adding some practicality to the existing lift. This Bubble 6-pack with heated seats is going to be an absolute luxury lift, so Juniper will definitely be my go-to method to get on the mountain going forward. Contrary to the trail map, Upper Juniper starts lookers right of Juniper Express and tops out near the bottom of the summit lift. This Juniper duo provides a crucial third out-of-base option to get to the upper mountain, along with the Grizzly Gondola and Glacier Express. Additionally, the new Juniper Trail will make lapping all of this West Bowl terrain so much easier and more efficient. I am uncertain, as of now, if one will be able to access Upper Juniper, or whatever it ends up being named, from the men's downhill or Juniper runs. If it is not accessible from those trails, that will be very unfortunate, but not the end of the world. But if it is accessible, it'll be another good option to lap the top of the world pod if that lift is busy. Now, this Glacier Express quad is the primary way to lap the lower mountain. When getting off the lift, almost everyone is funneled onto this Bald Eagle Trail. This, in addition to the crowds coming down the trails accessed by the Grizzly and Top of the World lifts, can lead to some congestion. Alternatively, you can cut through the Triple Bridge Terrain Park and access the Upper Juniper and Juniper runs, which are some really fun cruisers. Juniper can be reached from the Bald Eagle run. However, as mentioned previously, it's best to avoid this stretch as often as possible. Towards the bottom, you can either take the Easy Street Trail back to the main base or the Juniper's Jungle Trail to the Juniper pod. I prefer Juniper's Jungle. Heading back towards the top of Juniper is the start of the Ladies' Downhill Run, which is denoted, and now seems to be named, Lake Lindsay Way. While it can get a touch icy from time to time, this is overall a really fun and steep cruiser. Cameron's Way is another solid groomer and is on the steeper side for an intermediate cruiser. Both Wiwaxie and Pinecone Way are two enjoyable green trails that lead from the mountain to the base. Wiwaxie is steeper than Pinecone Way, however, Pinecone Way merges with the advanced trail Meadowlark, which can be stressful for beginners. In general, Louise is an okay resort for beginners, but there are far better options at nearby Sunshine Village. The final out-of-base lift option is the Grizzly Gondola. In addition to the lower mountain terrain we just talked about, this gondola services some additional upper mountain terrain. There are two green trails off this lift, both of which are harder than your average beginner run, Deer Run and Eagle Meadows. Deer Run offers a lot more fall line than Eagle Meadows and is overall more challenging. Eagle Meadows almost feels more like a glorified traverse than an actual interesting run. These runs get extremely icy and skied out pretty quick, so I can't really recommend them later on in the day. The one advantage to Eagle Meadows is that there are a few gates into some very underrated tree terrain underneath the Grizzly Gondola. Conditions vary, but if there's been a dump, this is a fun place to find some stashes since it's located off a green trail. If you wish to get to the top of the world lift from the Grizzly Gondola, you can either take lower flight, or ski down Deer Run and take a traverse through the trees on the skier's right. Wapta is a standard mogul run, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. Upper Grouse, Eagle Poma, Eagle's Beak, and Eagle Flight are actually not directly accessible from the Grizzly Gondola, so you'll have to sidestep up. Despite the difficulty of access, all of these get pretty bumped up. Upper Grouse and Eagle Poma are more gladed, while Eagle's Beak and Eagle Flight are more traditional bump runs. Finally, the Meadowlark Trail is one of the longest trails at Lake Louise. It's typically groomed and can be really fun to bomb at the end of the day. As mentioned earlier, watch out for beginner traffic as the run merges onto Pinecone Way. You also have the option of skiing the lowest Meadowlark Trail instead of continuing to follow Pinecone Way to the base. I can't speak for the Juniper combination yet, but I can say that in the past, the Glacier Express Top of the World Express combo was my preferred means of getting out of the base since it provides the quickest access to Lake Louise's legendary backside. The Grizzly Gondola provides the quickest access to the Larch Pod. Which lift you should start on really depends on what you want to prioritize skiing first. Of course, now, given the option between Juniper or Glacier, I would advise just eyeballing which has a shorter line. Okay, now let's move on to the first seriously good frontside zone with the Top of the World pod. This is one of the more interesting pods at the resort. There's a lot to talk about here, so let's go from looker's left to right. Starting with Charlie's Choice, this is an ungroomed intermediate trail that honestly isn't worth doing unless you're trying to access these lower trails from Maintenance Gully to Ollie Slides East. There's a lot of really good skiing here, and honestly, I don't have time to talk about all of it, so I'll leave it to you to explore. I will say that this terrain is quite varied and much steeper than the single black rating implies. The snow coverage can also be sketchy due to its lower elevation, so I wouldn't recommend going here when conditions are variable. Note that by committing to this terrain, you'll end up below the Top of the World Express. You'll have to take the long and flat egress trail to exit this terrain. From there, you can head up Upper Juniper for another lap. If you continue on Charlie's Choice, you'll merge onto Upper Wiwaxie, which leads back to the Top of the World lift. Jerry's Jungle is a fun little beginner run that briefly goes through the trees. However, neither of these runs are accessible to beginners because you have to take a blue or black to get here. Skiers right of Upper Wiwaxie is Men's Downhill, one of my personal favorite groomers on the mountain. Like Lake Lindsay, conditions here can get pretty icy, but this is definitely worth checking out for anyone who loves steep groomers. From Upper Wawaxie, take the Whitehorn Cat Track to return to the top of the World Lift. Sunset Terrace is a fun, wide-open blue groomer that leads to the lower part of Home Run. Off the right side of Sunset Terrace are Tickety Shoot and Tight Turn, two short bump runs. The former is slightly longer, while the latter is slightly steeper. There are a few decent stashes in the trees between Tickety Shoot and Sunset Terrace. Sunset Gully, Helens, and Home Run Chutes are basically part of one massive ungroomed bowl. Helens is typically the bumpiest entry into this bowl, so I'd recommend avoiding it. The Home Run Chutes can also be very rocky, so if you're concerned about your equipment, I'd be careful around there. Home Run is another intermediate cruiser, like Sunset Terrace, that goes around this large bowl. I do prefer Sunset Terrace to Home Run since it's more wide open. You can continue following Home Run to Upper Wawaxie or take a left turn into an intermediate run called Grizzly Gully. Grizzly Gully is one of the toughest intermediate trails I've skied and would definitely be rated black anywhere else. It's ungroomed, narrow, and has some really trash snow since so many runs filter into it. Although it's loved by most, I'm personally not a fan of this run. Kernahans and Grizzly Bowl are short but quite steep. These don't really get a lot of traffic due to their hidden nature off the Home Run trail, but face south, so I wouldn't recommend them. Mirkwood, Steep and Flat, and Upshoots are much better alternatives, and there can be some solid stashes in these runs. In general, all of the terrain lookers right at the lift is my favorite in the pod because of the great snow and varied layout. The flight chutes are my favorite runs in the Top of the World pod. They're poorly marked, but that's what keeps the snow here fresh. The terrain here is more interesting than what you'd see on your typical single black trail. This Flight Chutes Cat Track is only directly accessible from the backside Paradise Lift. However, there's still a traverse that you can take from the Top of the World Lift. I slightly prefer Flight Chute 2 to Chute 1. However, both are great and worth doing individually. They're relatively unique runs, as they're not groomed but also not really bumped out. It's really just an area you have to ski to understand. The final lift on the front side is the Summit Lift. This lift serves an absolutely massive amount of terrain, but for this video, we'll focus on the remaining frontside terrain you can ski off it. There are two intermediate trails off the summit, Skyline and Sunset. I believe Skyline is left ungroomed and Sunset is groomed, but don't quote me on this. While these offer the best views of any intermediate trail at the resort, they're quite steep and narrow, so I can't recommend them for low intermediates. Sunset Pocket is an advanced alternative to Sunset. Headwall, Middle Limits, Headwall Bowl, and Outer Limits are all steep, lengthy mogul runs. The coverage can be a bit variable in the early season, but it's definitely worth checking out at least one of these runs if you're into bumps. Finally, the West Bowl terrain is the newest zone to open at Lake Louise. I cannot describe how massive this area is. There's so much amazing terrain here you could ski weeks without covering the whole thing. Given the sheer scale of West Bowl, there's no way I'll be able to cover every single spot, but I can certainly give a good overarching guide. Firstly, this terrain is incredibly steep. I'm shocked that runs of this caliber can be rated single black, as they'd be rated double almost anywhere else. Beyond the pitch, this terrain feels more like gated side country than anything else. In general, West Bowl runs start off in the alpine and filter into glades or natural gullies. The entrance into the area can be extremely rocky, so be mindful of your equipment. Sometimes you'll be required to ski down Outer Limits and enter the West Bowl area a bit lower down due to insufficient snow in the alpine. There's a traverse known as Pipestone Ridge that runs along the top of the zone. Although the snow will be the freshest the further you go, I'd encourage you to drop in sooner rather than later. This is because you'll lose a significant amount of vert and time doing the full traverse. If you make it all the way to runs like White Rabbit, it's only a matter of a few turns before you hit the long, flat, and time-consuming Egress Trail. For the upcoming season and onward, the best way to lap the West Bowl terrain will be Upper Juniper to Summit, since the Egress Trail funnels you to the bottom of the Upper Juniper lift. We'll now switch to the backside map to talk about the Ptarmigan Pod, the first of two backside lifts. This fixed grip quad services some of Lake Louise's best below treeline steeps. However, most people ride it as a means of getting out of the backside and larch areas. The top terminal of the Grizzly Gondola is adjacent to the top terminal of the Ptarmigan lift, so if you're coming from the base, that's the fastest way to get to this pod. You can also get here from any trail in the main backside area by taking this Pika Trail, which isn't nearly as flat as its depiction on the trail map would imply. Pika is one of two green runs on the backside of Louise, and is the best way for beginners to get to the large pod. Pika trees are just okay. I think there's better tree skiing elsewhere in this area. Peekaboo is a narrow path through the trees that lets you ski the bottom part of Old Ptarmigan from the Paradise Lift, which we'll talk about in Part B. Raven is just your standard short bump run. Old Ptarmigan starts off as a road but becomes a windy groomer about halfway down. The pod's namesake run, Ptarmigan, is groomed semi-frequently and is one of the best cruisers on the backside. Even though they're directly under the lift, Ptarmigan glades and exhibition trees are the best glades on the mountain. The pitch is steep and sustained, and the trees seem to be never-ending. The snow conditions can be variable, but after a recent dump, there's no better place to be. This 007 Ptarmigan catwalk essentially leads you from Old Ptarmigan into the glades. However, you can enter these trees at any point. Exhibition is a mogul run that goes directly under the lift. In the early season, this run can actually have some pretty technical features, and because of its popularity and generally bad snow conditions, I tend to avoid it. There's a lot of good tree skiing underneath these Ptarmigan chutes that's less popular than Ptarmigan glades and exhibition trees, but still really fun. These Ptarmigan chutes are some of the most technical runs at Lake Louise. I'm baffled as to how they're rated single black, as they'd certainly be rated double black anywhere else. They feature extremely steep pitches, cliffs, rocks, and tight trees. These are seriously dangerous and not to be taken lightly. Due to avalanche risk, they're rarely open, so if they're open during your visit and you're confident in your ability, they're worth checking out. In general, Chute 3 is the widest and Chute 2 is the narrowest. Chute 1 is somewhere in between. Note that for all the terrain lookers left of the Ptarmigan lift, you're going to want to cut back to the lift sooner rather than later to avoid any flat catwalking at the bottom. Before wrapping up this Insider's Guide, I want to talk about the future Richardson's Ridge terrain. This Richardson's Ridge lift will primarily service brand new intermediate and advanced terrain on Louise's backside, which will hopefully provide some relief to the Larch, Paradise, and Ptarmigan lifts. In the immediate future, this lift will only be accessible by coming down Ptarmigan or Pica to that intersection, as the lift will start there. In the long term, there may eventually be a lift called Prune Picker that will run from Temple Lodge here at the base of Ptarmigan and Larch to the bottom of Richardson's Ridge. Richardson's Ridge is going to help a lot when it comes to overall flow in the backside. We are planning to eventually revisit Lake Louise in the future to evaluate all of these future additions, and when we do, we'll make a third part to this Insider's Guide. Well, that's about it for the Frontside and Ptarmigan areas. Go check out Part B now, all about the legendary steeps of the Paradise and Summit pods. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.